Greetings, travelers. Leave the present behind. We have an ancient world to explore. Together, let us step back to the 1st century to witness the absolute deluge of the southwest monsoon. We will walk through the riverside warehouses of ancient Kerala, stand in the shadow of the great Roman merchant fleets, and uncover the immense, hidden wealth of the Muziris trade. The deafening, isolating roar of the Edavapathy rain hammers against the steeply pitched, interlocking terracotta roof tiles high above our heads. The air inside this timber storehouse is remarkably cool, carrying the heavy, damp scent of the swollen river outside. You stand before a tall, heavy brass nilavilaku, an oil lamp that anchors the room in a pool of steady golden light. You reach out with a pair of long bronze shears, methodically trimming the charred edge of the thick cotton wick. You watch the small, bright flame dance and steady itself against the slight damp draft that slips through the timber walls. It is a quiet, deliberate task of maintenance, holding back the oppressive darkness of the ancient night with a single, carefully tended flame. Beyond the flickering halo of the oil lamp, an overwhelming and chaotic power presses inward from the pitch black. Just inches beneath the thick teakwood floorboards, the swollen Periyar River rushes past with terrifying speed and mass. You feel the deep, continuous vibration of millions of gallons of black water surging endlessly toward the Arabian Sea. It is a kinetic force that threatens to consume the fragile shoreline entirely. The river is a living, breathing entity tonight, engorged by the relentless mountain rains of the Western Ghats, tearing at the muddy banks and dragging heavy debris through the lightless depths. You stand directly above this violent current, separated from the crushing depths by nothing but a layer of shaped wood. The sheer scale of the monsoon flood induces a profound sense of awe, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of human ambition when confronted by the immense, untamed weight of the Indian monsoon. You luxuriate in the profound impossibility of this sanctuary. The physical conditions outside are absolute and unforgiving. The rain falls in solid, crushing sheets, seeking every microscopic seam and flaw in the structure, while the raging river below constantly attempts to pull the very foundation into the abyss. It stands to reason that any structure built upon the muddy, shifting banks of such a violent river would rot, warp, and ultimately shatter under the dual assault of the deluge and the flood. Yet the air inside this warehouse remains perfectly, incredibly dry. You walk across the wide floor, feeling the unyielding strength of the boards beneath your feet. You listen to the raging torrent beneath you, marveling at the stark boundary between the deadly chaos of the storm and the absolute stillness of the room. The building is a defiant paradox, standing firm against an environment that should, by all laws of nature, reduce it to splintered driftwood. The survival of this ancient storehouse is no accident, but the result of the absolute architectural mastery of the coastal builders. You look down to the base of the walls, where the structure rests upon deeply sunk, massive blocks of laterite. This porous, iron-rich stone is cut directly from the earth and hardens upon exposure to the air. It does not fight the water. It breathes, absorbing the excess moisture from the mud and wicking it away from the timber. Above this brilliant foundation, the building is constructed entirely of massive, heavy teakwood joinery. There are no iron nails to rust and fail in the damp salt air. Instead, the master carpenters have utilized intricate wooden pegs and interlocking joints that are designed to flex and shift with the wind and the vibration of the river. The teakwood holds fast, inherently rich in natural oils that repel the rot. Together, the breathing stone and the flexible timber create a bone-dry, impenetrable pocket of safety amidst the overwhelming deluge. The brilliant engineering of the warehouse allows you to forget the danger of the flood below. The heavy, relentless assault of the rain upon the terracotta tiles slowly settles into a continuous, hypnotic white noise, wrapping the room in a thick, auditory blanket. The golden light of the nilavilaku reflects warmly off the polished teak, casting long, soft shadows across the empty staging tables. The storm has been entirely locked outside, leaving only a profound and heavy peace within the walls. But as the rhythm of the rain becomes an accepted silence, a new sound cuts slowly through the dark. It is not the chaotic rush of the water, but a deep, rhythmic, low-frequency groaning of immense weight. It is the sound of massive, foreign timber rubbing heavily against the great wooden docks just outside the heavy warehouse doors, signaling that the true cargo of the night has finally arrived. The heavy timber doors of the warehouse are pushed open against the relentless wind, and the atmosphere of the room is instantly transformed. The damp, earthy smell of the local teak and the muddy river is suddenly overtaken by a sharp and foreign scent. It is the heavy, unmistakable odor of wet pine pitch, cold salt water, and the rich, dark remnants of Mediterranean olive oil. You stand before the wooden staging table, enveloped in this sudden influx of a distant world. Your hands move with a slow and practiced grace, unrolling a coarse, damp hemp manifest that has just been carried inside from the violent rain. The fabric is rough against your fingertips, heavy with the moisture of the sea. You press the edges flat upon the wood, smoothing out the wrinkles of a voyage that began thousands of miles away. You lean closer to the golden light of the oil lamp, running a single finger slowly down the long columns of text. The ink is dark and meticulously applied, a fascinating blend of sharp Greek lettering standing side by side with the curved, flowing script of ancient Tamil Brahmi. It is a quiet and precise administrative task, deciphering the heavy ledger of the Yavanas as the storm continues to rage just beyond the threshold. As your finger traces the staggering inventory listed upon the damp hemp, a profound sense of awe begins to settle over the quiet room. You look toward the open doorway, out into the pitch black of the surging river, and you consider the sheer, terrifying scale of the ocean that lies just beyond the river mouth. The merchant ships of the Roman fleet are colossal structures of carved wood and canvas, yet they are infinitesimally small when weighed against the absolute fury of the open sea. The journey from the Red Sea ports of Roman Egypt to the Malabar coast is a vast and desolate crossing, entirely devoid of land or refuge. To survive such a voyage in antiquity, relying only on timber and woven sails, borders upon the impossible. The Arabian Sea is a deep and unforgiving void, prone to violent swells and crushing currents that would easily tear a lesser vessel apart. You feel the immense, heavy reality of this crossing, the staggering courage, and the desperate pursuit of wealth required to cast a wooden hull into the terrifying, unbroken expanse of the ocean. You luxuriate in the profound impossibility of this maritime achievement. The physical realities of the ancient world demand that ships hug the safety of the coastline, crawling agonizingly slowly from port to port to avoid the deadly, unpredictable deep. Yet, this heavy hemp manifest speaks of a different reality, a journey that defied the fundamental boundaries of the sea. You trace the names of the merchants and the staggering quantities of cargo, considering the absolute isolation of a crew suspended between the crushing depths and the violent sky. The stakes of this crossing were absolute, measured in immense fortunes and the lives of hundreds of men. If a vessel were to lose its heading or succumb to the shifting weather, it would simply vanish into the dark water without a trace. You wait within the quiet, golden light of the warehouse, feeling the immense weight of the unknown sea pressing against the timber walls. The sheer magnitude of the isolation required to complete this journey is staggering. A colossal gamble against the elements that leaves you wondering how such massive, lumbering freighters could ever find their way across a featureless and terrifying ocean. The answer to this staggering maritime puzzle is not found in the strength of the timber, but in a profound mastery of the atmosphere itself. The Greek and Roman navigators had unlocked the great, invisible secret of the Arabian Sea, the strict and predictable clockwork of the Hippolytus winds. They learned that the immense, chaotic power of the monsoon was not merely a destructive force, but a reliable planetary engine. Instead of fighting the weather or crawling safely along the perilous pirate-infested coastline, These master mariners chose to intentionally ride the storm. They would wait in the Egyptian ports until the precise moment the southwestern winds began to howl, and then they would raise their massive, square-rigged sails. The violent, continuous gale would catch the heavy canvas, hurling the great ships directly across the open, deep-water ocean in a terrifying and perfectly calculated trajectory. This meteorological brilliance slashed a dangerous year-long coastal crawl into a direct 40-day shot across the void, riding the very breath of the monsoon until the green mountains of the Western Ghats finally rose from the sea. The immense gamble of the Hippolytus winds has paid off once again, delivering the foreign fleet safely to the muddy banks of the Periyar. Outside the heavy doors, the deep, rhythmic groaning of the timber ceases as the colossal ship is finally brought to rest. You listen to the heavy, wet slapping of thick, rough-spun coir ropes as they are thrown around the massive wooden mooring posts and pulled agonizingly tight against the current. The sheer physical weight of the vessel settles into the riverbed, groaning against the restraints. Then a new sound breaks through the drumming rain, the dull, reverberating thud of a massive wooden gangplank, dropping heavily onto the wet docks. The connection between the Roman world and the Malabar coast is physically forged in the dark. The long, terrifying voyage is complete, and the slow, methodical transfer of unimaginable wealth is about to begin. You roll the damp hemp manifest back into a tight cylinder and clear the center of your wooden table, making way for the heavy, metallic cargo that is already being carried up the ramp. The air inside the warehouse fills with a new, distinct sound, cutting sharply through the continuous drumming of the rain. It is the rhythmic, precise clinking of heavy metal striking against a solid bronze weighing pan. The visual space of the room seems to contract, fading into a moody, atmospheric half-light, where only the sharp glint of gold stands out against the dark, oiled teakwood of the table. You sit before the scales, engaged in the slow, deliberate task of auditing the imperial currency that has just crossed the Arabian Sea. Your fingers move with methodical care, lifting and stacking newly minted Roman aurae. The coins are dense and cool to the touch, carrying the immense physical weight of pure gold. You run your thumb across the raised, flawless profile of Emperor Nero, stamped perfectly into the ancient metal. You place each coin upon the bronze pan, listening to the heavy, satisfying ring as it settles against its brothers. The counting is a quiet, rhythmic meditation, a meticulous tally of the wealth that has been carried from the heart of the Mediterranean directly into the shadows of the monsoon. As the stacks of gold continue to rise upon the dark timber, a profound and heavy tension begins to permeate the small pool of light. You look at the staggering accumulation of wealth sitting openly upon the table, and then you look out toward the rough wooden walls that separate you from the endless, churning dark of the Periyar River. The contrast is immense. You are holding the absolute concentrated power of an empire, yet it rests within a simple organic shed, constructed of mud, laterite, and shaped logs, perched at the very edge of the known world. The vulnerability of this moment is absolute. The sheer volume of the aurae represents the labor of tens of thousands, the output of distant subterranean mines, and the authority of Rome itself. It is a fortune that could purchase armies or build colossal monuments in marble, and yet here it sits, vulnerable to the damp air and the crushing power of the storm outside. You feel the immense, silent weight of this juxtaposition, a terrifying concentration of value, resting softly upon a wooden table in the deep jungle. You luxuriate in the profound and dizzying reality of this physical wealth. The physical conditions of the exchange are raw and elemental. You trace the edges of the gold, feeling the precise manufactured ridges that stand in stark defiance of the wild, untamed nature of the monsoon roaring just outside the door. The stakes of this single room are difficult to fully comprehend. If these coins were to slip into the dark river below, they would sink instantly into the heavy mud, lost forever to the depths. You focus entirely upon the heavy golden glow reflecting in the dim light, considering the vast and invisible current of desire that pulled this metal across the earth. It is an obsession that defies logic, a continuous hemorrhaging of wealth from the west to the east that seems almost impossible to sustain. You wait within the quiet, rhythmic clinking of the scales, wondering what power could possibly compel an entire empire to empty its deepest vaults and send its most precious resource into the terrifying void of the Arabian Sea, knowing that much of it will never return. The answer to this immense outward flow of gold is found in the staggering macroeconomic scale of the Muziris trade, a reality that deeply troubled the philosophers of Rome. The historian Pliny the Elder documented this exact transaction with profound bitterness, leaving behind a written lament that echoes through the centuries. He complained that the Roman Empire was being systematically drained of its wealth, calculating that the Indian subcontinent was absorbing no less than 50 million sesterces annually. This was not a minor exchange of goods, but a massive, unstoppable hemorrhage of the imperial treasury. The patricians of Rome were completely consumed by an obsessive pursuit of Eastern luxury, willing to trade their hard currency for the spices, silks, and precious stones that only the Malabar coast could provide. The gold beneath your hands is the physical evidence of this global imbalance. It is a one-way current of pure wealth, flowing steadily away from the marble columns of the Palatine Hill and vanishing forever into the deep, fragrant jungles of the ancient Tamil kingdoms. The staggering weight of the imperial treasury is finally accounted for. You sweep the heavy, clinking stacks of gold coins off the bronze weighing pan and guide them carefully into thick, rough-spun canvas bags. The gold slides together with a dull, heavy resonance, a sound of absolute density and finality. You tie the heavy canvas shut with thick leather cords and lift the formidable weight, placing the bags carefully into a large, iron-banded chest resting upon the floor. The heavy iron lid is closed and secured, locking the wealth of Rome away into the dark. The wide oiled teakwood of the staging table is now completely clear and empty once more. The sharp, metallic smell of the gold fades quickly from the damp air, replaced by a sudden and profound change in the atmosphere. You turn toward the open doorway, watching as the laborers carry in the very first sacks of the true treasure of the night, bringing with them an intensely warm and earthy aroma that begins to instantly overtake the room. The air of the timber warehouse fills with an intensely warm, sharp, and earthy aroma, a scent so dense it seems to press back against the cool dampness of the river outside. Heavy burlap sacks are hauled onto the cleared teakwood table, their rough, woven fabric dusted with fine, dark powder. You stand before them, reaching out to untie the thick jute cords that bind the tops. As the rough fabric falls open, you plunge your bare hands deep into the mountain of dried, wrinkled peppercorns. The tiny, hard spheres slide past your skin like warm, heavy sand. It is a slow, tactile task. You are checking the absolute depths of the sack for any lingering trace of moisture, any faint hint of dampness that might have crept in from the storm. Your fingers sift methodically through the black gold of the Malabar coast, feeling the uniform, dry texture of thousands of individual berries. The sharp, spiced air settles deep into the timber room, masking the scent of the river and wrapping you in the profound, grounding warmth of the harvest. As your hands move through the dense, shifting mass of the peppercorns, a profound sense of vulnerability begins to rise within the dark room. This tiny, unassuming berry is the undisputed catalyst of global commerce, more fiercely desired than the gold resting in the iron chest beside you. Yet, you feel the terrifying fragility of this immense fortune. The peppercorns are entirely organic, fiercely susceptible to the heavy, rotting dampness of the ancient world. You look up toward the steeply pitched terracotta roof, listening to the violent, ceaseless drumming of the southwest monsoon. The tension is palpable. If a single, hidden leak were to form in the ceiling above, or if a slow, unseen seep of moisture were to rise through the thick floorboards from the surging river below, the entire cargo would be lost. The water would trigger a rapid, unstoppable rot, turning a king's ransom of black gold into a foul, decaying mass before the Roman ships could even lift their sails to return to the Mediterranean. You luxuriate in the terrifying juxtaposition of the elements. The physical conditions required to transport this spice across the ancient world are agonizingly strict, yet it is borne into the wettest, most humid environment on Earth. You draw a handful of the wrinkled spheres up into the golden light of the oil lamp, feeling their hard, unyielding weight. The stakes of their preservation are absolute. A voyage of over 40 days across the open, salt-sprayed Arabian Sea lies ahead, followed by a slow, grueling caravan trek across the scorching deserts of Egypt. The environmental extremes are staggering, and there is no modern sanctuary to protect the cargo from the relentless moisture and the crushing heat. You wait within the sharp, aromatic air of the warehouse, feeling the immense weight of the journey ahead pressing down upon these tiny, fragile berries. The sheer impossibility of delivering this organic treasure across thousands of miles of hostile territory seems absolute, a botanical puzzle that demands an elegant and perfectly executed solution from the hands of the ancient harvesters. The answer to this ancient logistical puzzle is found within the brilliant, deliberate processing of the Piper nigrum plant. This black pepper did not fall from the vine in this hardened state. It was harvested while still green and unripe, pulled by hand from the high-altitude vines clinging to the misty slopes of the Western Ghats. The local cultivators possess a profound mastery over the spice. To ensure its survival, the green berries are briefly plunged into cauldrons of actively boiling water. This intense, surging heat perfectly ruptures the cell walls of the fruit and cleanses it of decay. The berries are then spread out beneath the fierce tropical sun. Over several days of intense heat, the outer skin shrinks, darkens, and hardens into a dense, impenetrable, wrinkled shield. This brilliant method of preservation perfectly seals the volatile piperine oil deep inside the core. It transforms a fragile, perishable green fruit into a tough, armor-plated sphere, fully capable of surviving the dampness of the sea and the heat of the desert without losing a fraction of its fiery bite. The armor-plated spheres of black pepper cascade back down into the burlap sack, completely dry and perfectly preserved. The tense inspection is over, and the heavy physical labor resumes in the dark. You listen to the rhythmic, sweeping sound of carved wooden scoops digging deep into the mounds of spice. The workers are transferring the peppercorns into massive, solid teakwood shipping crates, lined with dry palm leaves for the long voyage. The steady, shushing sound of the shifting pepper creates a deep, hypnotic lull that fills the warm, aromatic air of the warehouse. It is a comforting, continuous rhythm that slowly settles the mind, masking the roar of the rain outside. The heavy crates are hammered shut and carried away into the shadows, clearing the staging table once again. The intensely warm, earthy scent begins to dissipate as the burlap sacks are removed. You turn your attention away from the warmth of the spice, stepping toward a thick, leather-bound satchel resting upon a lower bench, preparing to inspect an entirely different cargo, something ancient, heavy, and remarkably cold to the touch. The heavy leather satchel is drawn onto the teakwood table, and you loosen the thick rawhide ties. Inside, wrapped in coarse cloth, lie heavy, unpolished hexagonal crystals of raw beryl brought down from the interior mines of Padua. You lift one of the stones into the focused, warm light of the oil lamp, feeling its immense, drawing coldness against your skin. It is a stark contrast to the lingering heat of the pepper. You take a soft linen cloth and begin to gently wipe away the stubborn river mud and ancient dust that still clings to the deep facets of the crystal. The rhythmic, repetitive motion of the linen against the smooth, unyielding mineral creates a soft, hushing sound. You turn the heavy stone methodically in your hands, revealing glimpses of pale, translucent green beneath the rough exterior, anchoring your focus entirely on the physical weight and the cold, smooth texture of the Earth's deep geometry. As the river mud is slowly cleared away, a profound and quiet tension begins to settle over the inspection. These stones are immensely valuable, holding fortunes within their pale crystalline depths, yet assessing their true worth in the heart of a raging monsoon borders upon the impossible. You hold the heavy barrel up to the flickering golden flame of the Nilavilaku, attempting to peer into the very center of the stone. The light dances and shifts continuously, throwing deep, moving shadows across the internal fractures and hidden inclusions of the crystal. You feel the heavy, oppressive weight of the storm outside, a blinding deluge that has robbed the world of the sun, leaving you to judge the absolute clarity of an ancient gemstone by the fragile, wavering light of a single burning wick. The sheer difficulty of the task induces a profound sense of isolation, a delicate negotiation of value in a room entirely swallowed by the dark. You luxuriate in the exquisite difficulty of this solitary appraisal. The physical realities of the ancient world demand absolute perfection from these stones, yet the environment offers no assistance in revealing their secrets. You trace the sharp, hexagonal edges of the beryl, feeling the immense geological pressure that forged them deep within the crust of the earth over millions of years. The stakes of this transaction are absolute. If a flawed stone is sent across the Arabian Sea, it will shatter under the tools of the Roman artisans, rendering the long, perilous journey entirely worthless. You wait within the dim, golden light of the warehouse, observing the pale green reflections shifting within the cold mineral. The absolute stillness of the stone stands in stark defiance of the violent, surging river below, presenting a puzzle of light and clarity that refuses to be easily solved. You feel the immense, silent weight of the Roman expectation pressing upon these unpolished crystals, a demand for perfection that seems impossible to guarantee in the heavy shadows of the monsoon. The answer to this intense, demanding scrutiny is found in the highly specific and extraordinary use the Romans intend for these flawless Indian aquamarines. The patricians of the empire are not merely seeking these stones to carve into decorative jewelry. The flawlessly clear, pale green beryl possesses a profound optical destiny. When it finally reaches the Mediterranean, master artisans will carefully cut and polish the absolute center of the clearest crystals into a smooth, curved shape known as a smaragdus. These are the very first magnifying lenses of the ancient world. They are used by the aging elite of Rome, including the Emperor Nero himself, who holds the polished green stone to his eye to correct his failing vision while watching the distant gladiatorial games in the glaring sun. The extreme clarity you are searching for in the flickering lamplight is not for vanity, but for the fundamental restoration of human sight, drawing the pale green light of the gemstone directly into the eye of an emperor. The flawless stones are identified, and the heavy burden of the inspection is lifted. You carefully lay the cold, green beryl crystals onto the table, taking up layers of fine, raw silk to wrap them for the long journey ahead. The soft fabric folds smoothly over the sharp, hexagonal edges, silencing the heavy clinking of the stones. You place the wrapped bundles gently into a small, padded wooden chest, securing the lid against the dampness of the room. As the lid closes, the cold, mineral presence of the gems is locked away, and the atmosphere within the warehouse begins to shift once more. You sweep the remnants of the river mud from the wide teakwood table, preparing the surface for the next offering. The sharp, earthy scent of the pepper has faded entirely, and as the laborers carry in a series of heavy, pale logs from the deep jungle, a profoundly calming, ancient, and woody aroma begins to slowly fill the damp, cool air. You stand before the heavy, pale logs that have just been carried into the golden light of the warehouse. As they are laid upon the staging table, a heavy, creamy, and profoundly calming scent begins to fill the damp air, completely overtaking the lingering chill of the river outside. It is the unmistakable deep aroma of ancient sandalwood drawn directly from the dense forests of the interior. You take up a curved iron adze, its heavy blade honed to a razor edge, and you begin the slow, methodical work of preparing the timber. Your hands guide the iron tool along the length of the log, gently shaving away the pale, unremarkable outer bark. The rhythmic tearing sound of the wood yielding to the blade echoes softly in the quiet room. With every long, deliberate stroke, you strip away the protective outer layers, slowly exposing the rich, dark, and highly aromatic heartwood hidden beneath the surface. It is a quiet, repetitive labor, filling the heavy air of the storehouse with long, curling ribbons of fragrant wood. As the dark heartwood is slowly revealed, a profound sense of awe settles over the heavy timber. You trace the dense grain of the exposed wood, considering the perilous and chaotic journey this massive log has already endured just to reach the safety of the Muziris docks. The sandalwood tree does not grow near the coast, but is anchored deep within the inaccessible elevated jungles of the Western Ghats. To transport such an immense, dead weight down to the sea requires a terrifying surrender to the elements. The local harvesters must lash these heavy logs to simple, fragile bamboo rafts and cast them directly into the fast-flowing, swollen rivers of the Monsoon. You feel the immense, crushing weight of the wood, and you imagine the violent, uncontrolled descent through the deep gorges and whitewater rapids of the interior. It is a journey of absolute chaos, trusting a fortune in timber to the brutal, churning mercy of the floodwaters. You luxuriate in the staggering impossibility of this river passage. The physical realities of the ancient world demand that the heavy timber survive an environment that effortlessly shatters solid stone. You run your hand along the smooth, exposed core of the sandalwood, feeling the absolute density of the grain that stood firm against the pounding, acidic rain and the crushing depths of the river. The stakes of this wild harvest are absolute. If the fragile bamboo rafts were to break apart in the violent rapids, or if the heavy logs were to become waterlogged and sink into the deep, churning mud, the entire fortune would be lost to the jungle forever. You wait within the warm, fragrant light of the oil lamp, surrounded by the deafening roar of the Periyar River outside, and you wonder how such a perfectly intact and immensely valuable piece of organic matter could possibly survive months of total submersion in a hostile, rotting flood without succumbing to decay. The answer to this miraculous survival is found deep within the slow biological alchemy of the sandalwood tree itself. The heavy, profoundly calming fragrance that fills the warehouse is not merely a perfume but a highly evolved, impenetrable defense mechanism. Over decades of slow growth, the tree concentrates its potent essential oils perfectly within the dense core of the trunk. This heavy saturation of aromatic oil creates a toxic and utterly hostile environment for the insects, fungi, and deep rot that consume lesser woods in the damp jungle. It is an organic armor forged from pure fragrance. Because of this brilliant botanical adaptation, the heartwood remains completely untouched by the rotting floodwaters and the moisture of the long sea voyage. It is a heavy, indestructible core that will easily survive the crossing of the Arabian Sea, destined to be carved and eventually burned as a sacred towering plume of temple incense within the marble sanctuaries of Rome. The heavy log is entirely stripped of its pale bark, and the dark, fragrant core is fully exposed to the warm light. The deep, creamy aroma of the sandalwood hangs thick and heavy in the air, creating a profound stillness that pushes back against the endless drumming of the storm. You set the heavy iron adze aside and take up a long-woven palm frond brew. With slow, rhythmic, and sweeping motions, you gather the fragrant, curled wood shavings into a neat, perfect pile upon the teakwood floor. The soft, shushing sound of the dried fronds against the wood creates a deep, calming cadence in the empty room. You clear the wide floorboards entirely, sweeping away the dust of the deep jungle. The heavy physical labor of the local export is complete, and the vast, empty staging table is now fully prepared to receive the delicate and impossibly fragile imports that have just been carried down the gangplank of the great Roman ship. You stand before the cleared staging table as the laborers carry in the cargo of the distant west. The gritty, coarse sound of heavy, porous terracotta scraping against the oiled teakwood floorboards echoes through the damp warehouse. You place your hands upon the tall, slender clay vessels, feeling the cold, rough surface that has absorbed the deep chill of the ocean crossing. These are the great Dressel 2-4 amphorae, shipped directly from the fertile volcanic slopes of Campania. Your fingers trace the thick, stamped maker's marks pressed deeply into the curved clay handles, a permanent signature of a Roman potter an ocean away. You lean in close to the dim, flickering light of the oil lamp, carefully inspecting the thick, heavy wax seals plugging the narrow necks. It is a slow, methodical task of verification, checking the integrity of the ancient clay to ensure the Mediterranean wine and thick olive oil within have not been tainted by the salt water. The rain continues its endless, heavy drumming upon the roof, a stark contrast to the quiet, dusty work of inspecting the sun-baked earth of Italy. As you methodically inspect the tall, narrow vessels, a profound and heavy mystery begins to take shape in the shadows of the room. You look at the precarious, seemingly unstable design of these clay jars. They are incredibly top-heavy, featuring a wide, swelling shoulder that tapers down into an impossibly narrow, pointed base. If you were to let go of the amphora, it would immediately tip over and shatter against the solid teakwood floor. You feel the immense, fragile weight of the terracotta, and you consider the terrifying reality of the journey it has just completed. The Roman ships that carried these vessels endured weeks of violent, rolling ocean swells and crushing multi-directional kinetic shocks. The holds of those wooden freighters were chaotic environments, pitching violently in the grip of the monsoon winds. To transport a massive cargo of brittle, top-heavy clay jars across such an unforgiving, shifting landscape seems to be an act of absolute madness, a guarantee of catastrophic loss before the ship ever reached the deep waters of the Arabian Sea. You luxuriate in the profound impossibility of this fragile cargo. The physical conditions of the open ocean demand a low center of gravity and absolute stability, yet the Roman merchants chose to fill their massive hulls with the most unbalanced and delicate containers imaginable. You run your hand down the long, tapering body of the clay, feeling the precise manufactured curve that actively defies the fundamental need for balance. The stakes of this maritime puzzle are absolute. If the amphorae were to tip and shatter during the violent crossing, the heavy, acidic wine and slippery olive oil would flood the bilge, ruining the ship and destroying the immense fortunes of the patrician investors. You wait within the warm, golden light of the Nilla Villacu, listening to the deep, groaning timber of the moored ship outside, and you wonder how such a precarious, inherently flawed design could possibly survive the brutal kinetic violence of the deep sea. The amphora presents a physical paradox, a vessel seemingly built for destruction yet standing fully intact before you in the heavy, damp air of the Indian coast. The answer to this staggering maritime puzzle is not found upon the flat floorboards of the warehouse, but deep within the dark, specialized architecture of the Roman hull. The distinctive, pointed bottom of the amphora was never meant to stand upright upon flat ground. It is an ingenious piece of purpose-built marine engineering. Before the long voyage began, the Roman stevedores filled the very bottom of the massive wooden ship with a thick, heavy bed of dense sand ballast. The long, sharp points of the terracotta vessels were driven deep into this yielding sand, anchoring them perfectly against the movement of the ship. The wide, swelling shoulders of the amphorae were then wedged tightly against one another in a dense, interlocking honeycomb pattern. This brilliant, unified structure transformed a fragile collection of individual clay jars into a single, massive, shock-absorbing entity. The violent, kinetic energy of the crashing waves was perfectly distributed across the thick terracotta walls, allowing the top-heavy cargo to ride the crushing swells of the monsoon without ever tipping or shattering in the dark. The ingenious engineering of the Mediterranean world has delivered its heavy bounty perfectly intact. You carefully lay the heavy, pointed amphorae down upon their sides upon thick beds of woven coir, securing them against the wooden staging table. As you move the final vessel, A subtle, profound scent drifts into the damp, cool air. It is the distinct, rich, and heavily oxidized aroma of ancient Campanian wine, slowly leaking from a single, microscopically cracked wax seal. The deep, fruity smell of sun-drenched grapes mixes with the sharp, earthy scent of the river, creating a heavy and intoxicating atmosphere within the timber walls. You wipe your hands upon a clean linen cloth, leaving the heavy clay and the rich wine behind. The vast physical labor of the night is nearly complete, and you turn your attention toward a small, heavily secured wooden crate resting quietly in the shadows. It contains the final, impossible offering of the Roman fleet, a cargo so exquisitely fragile that it demands absolute, unwavering silence to unpack. You stand before the final, small wooden crate, and the heavy atmosphere of the warehouse seems to hold its breath. The shadows in the room stretch long and soft across the oiled teakwood, dancing gently with the flickering golden flame of the oil lamp. You reach down and carefully unfasten the heavy iron latch, lifting the thick wooden lid to reveal a deep protective bed of dry golden straw and fine wood sawdust. Your hands move with an agonizing, deliberate slowness, sinking into the soft packing material. It is a task that demands absolute, unwavering focus. You feel the edges of something incredibly smooth and entirely foreign to this damp, wooden world. With extreme care, you begin delicately lifting incredibly thin, weightless Millefiori glass bowls from their protective nest. The sound is a muted, delicate clinking, a high and musical note that stands in stark contrast to the heavy, drumming roar of the monsoon rain upon the roof. It is the thousand-flower glass of Alexandria, a cargo of breathtaking, silent beauty. As you hold the delicate, translucent bowl up to the warm light of the Nilavilaku, a stark and jarring contrast begins to settle heavily upon your mind. You look at the impossible, eggshell-thin fragility of this foreign glass, and then you look at the heavy, brutalist timber of the Kerala warehouse surrounding you. The walls are built of massive interlocking logs, designed to withstand the crushing weight of a flooded river and the violent kinetic force of the endless rain. Everything in this environment is heavy, dense, and built for survival. Yet, resting in the palm of your hand is an object so delicately forged that a single careless drop or a sudden shift in the floorboards would shatter it into 1,000 microscopic fragments. You feel the immense, terrifying vulnerability of the glass, a physical manifestation of absolute fragility brought into the heart of a violent, swirling storm. It is a masterpiece of light and color that seems entirely out of place in this dark and heavy world. You luxuriate in the profound impossibility of this delicate cargo. The physical conditions of the ancient sea route demand absolute resilience from anything placed within the dark hull of a wooden ship. You trace the smooth rim of the glass bowl, feeling a thinness that defies the brutal realities of the voyage. The stakes of this fragile transport are absolute and terrifying. If the heavy wooden crates had shifted during the 40-day crossing of the Arabian Sea, or if the relentless vibration of the waves had penetrated the thick layers of straw, the entire fortune of Alexandrian glass would have been reduced to worthless, colored sand. You wait within the quiet, golden halo of the oil lamp, surrounded by the deafening roar of the Periyar River outside, and you wonder how such a delicate, seemingly impossible structure of matter could ever have been forged. The glass presents a physical paradox, an object that looks as though it should dissolve in the damp air, yet it possesses a rigid, enduring strength that carried it safely across the violent expanse of the ocean. The answer to this stunning paradox is found in the absolute chemical mastery of the Alexandrian glassblowers. This Millefiori bowl is not carved from a single stone, nor is it molded from simple clay. It is the result of a precise high-heat mixture of pure silica sand and caustic natron, a soda ash harvested from the dry desert lakes of ancient Egypt. When subjected to the roaring heat of the furnace, this mixture transforms into a glowing, molten state. You observe the precise and staggering reality of the craftsmanship within the floral patterns. The master artisans drew the molten glass out into long, microscopic and brilliantly colored threads, These delicate threads were then bundled, fused together under immense heat, and sliced into thin patterned cross-sections. These small discs were then laid carefully into a mold and heated once more until they seamlessly melted together, cooling incredibly slowly into a rigid liquid. The process perfectly locks the internal tension of the material, granting the eggshell-thin bowl a shocking structural integrity hidden beneath its delicate beauty. The mesmerizing, rigid liquid of the Alexandrian glass is carefully lowered back into its thick bed of golden straw. You pack the fine wood sawdust around the fragile rims, ensuring the 1,000 flower patterns are completely insulated from the heavy vibrations of the wooden floor. You close the thick lid of the crate and fasten the iron latch, locking the delicate masterpieces safely away from the damp, heavy air of the storm. The fragile items are now secure, completely untouched by the raging river and the endless rain outside. With this final task complete, the heavy physical labor of the night slowly gives way to a profound and absolute stillness. The laborers have retreated into the shadows, leaving you entirely alone in the dim, flickering light of the warehouse. The air is quiet, smelling faintly of old wood, sweet wine, and dry straw. You turn your back to the stacked cargo and walk slowly toward a small, solitary wooden desk resting in the corner, preparing for the meticulous, quiet, administrative wrap-up of the ancient night. You sit at the small, solitary wooden desk in the corner of the warehouse, enveloped entirely by the quiet isolation of the late hour. The heavy physical labor of the night has ended, and the air is filled with an incredibly close, rhythmic scratching sound. It is a slow, deliberate cadence, the sharp scrape of a heavy metal point pressing firmly against dried plant matter. You hold a narayam, a thick and heavy iron stylus, resting it comfortably against your fingers as you begin to finalize the night's ledger. Before you lies a stack of perfectly cured, rectangular palmyra palm leaves, known as thaliola, their surfaces smooth and dry to the touch. You press the iron tip into the fibrous surface of the leaf, etching the final tallies and inventory counts of the Roman cargo with painstaking precision. The sound of the metal carving into the brittle leaf is a deep, textural whisper that cuts clearly through the muffled drumming of the rain outside. It is a meticulous and deeply focused task, transferring the staggering wealth of the empire into the physical memory of the ancient tree. As the iron stylus continues its slow, scratching journey across the palm leaf, a profound and heavy tension begins to settle over the small wooden desk. You look down at the delicate, curving Tamil Brahmi script you are carving into the organic surface, and you consider the absolute permanence of this ancient record. This is not a ledger written with ink upon parchment, where a simple error might be washed away or scraped clean. The stylus physically wounds the leaf, creating deep, microscopic trenches that cannot be undone. You feel the immense, silent weight of accuracy pressing down upon your hand. If a single mistake is made, if a number is miscounted or a line is drawn too deeply and fractures the brittle fibers, the entire leaf is ruined and must be entirely discarded. The vulnerability of the record is absolute, demanding a state of perfect, unwavering concentration amidst the overwhelming exhaustion of the long night and the relentless heavy rush of the flooded river just outside the timber walls. You luxuriate in the exquisite difficulty of this permanent ledger. The physical realities of the ancient accounting demand an impossible level of precision from a weary hand. You trace the sharp point of the narayam, feeling the unyielding rigidity of the iron against the fragile, yielding nature of the dried palm. The stakes of this meticulous engraving are absolute. This single stack of leaves will serve as the sole legal and financial record of a transaction that spans oceans and empires. If the ledger is flawed, the delicate trust between the foreign merchants and the local kingdom will falter. You wait within the warm, golden halo of the oil lamp, observing the faint, almost invisible scratches left behind by the stylus. The leaf presents a visual paradox. It is deeply carved, yet the script remains entirely hidden in the dim light, blending perfectly into the natural, pale color of the dried frond. You feel the immense weight of the unreadable history resting upon the desk, a silent and invisible accumulation of wealth that refuses to reveal itself to the naked eye. The answer to this invisible ledger is found in the brilliant chemical magic of ancient botanical ink. The intricate carvings are never meant to be read in their raw, natural state. Once the final tally is painstakingly etched into the leaf, you set the heavy iron stylus aside and take up a small, dark stone mortar. Inside rests a thick, pungent paste, a masterfully crafted mixture of ultrafine charcoal soot and highly concentrated lemongrass oil. You dip a soft cotton cloth into this dark mixture and begin to rub it firmly and methodically across the entire surface of the carved thaliola. The profound alchemy of the ancient world is revealed beneath your hand. The heavy lemongrass oil soaks deeply into the dry leaf, instantly preserving the organic material against the damp rot of the monsoon. Simultaneously, the dark, microscopic particles of the charcoal soot settle perfectly into the deep trenches left by the iron stylus. As you wipe the excess oil away, the invisible script suddenly leaps into stark, high-contrast black, transforming the blank leaf into a flawless, eternal document of trade. The final leaf is wiped clean, and the staggering wealth of the night is permanently bound into the black and golden fibers of the palm. You stack the finished thaliola together, their surfaces slick and fragrant with the sharp, preserving scent of the lemongrass. You take a long piece of soft, woven cotton twine and wrap it tightly around the rectangular bundle, securing the ancient record with a heavy knot. The meticulous, exacting work of the ledger is finally done, and the immense burden of the transaction lifts entirely from your shoulders. You place the tied bundle gently into a dry wooden box upon the desk, closing the lid with a soft final thud. The golden flame of the oil lamp wavers slightly in the damp draught, casting long shadows across the empty staging tables. The interior of the warehouse is completely still, and your gaze is slowly drawn away from the quiet desk, pulled outward toward the massive open timber doors, where the heavy dark rain continues to fall into the waiting night. You walk slowly toward the massive, open threshold of the timber warehouse, leaving the quiet glow of the oil lamp behind. As you stand at the edge of the heavy teakwood floorboards, the violent drumming of the southwest monsoon begins to soften, shifting from a hard, punishing drumbeat into a steady, incredibly thick hiss. The sharp, overwhelming smell of the wet earth deepens, rising up from the muddy banks to fill the cool night air. You lean against the massive wooden frame of the doorway, gazing out into the dark. It is a simple, meditative observation. You watch the heavy, unbroken curtains of rainwater cascade smoothly off the deep, overhanging eaves of the terracotta roof. The water falls in solid sheets, plunging directly into the dark, swirling river below, with a deep and continuous resonance. The air is saturated and heavy, wrapping you in a cool, damp embrace as you look out into the vast and shadowy expanse of the amphibious city. As your eyes adjust to the thick, hissing dark of the storm, a profound sense of impermanence begins to reveal itself. You look out over the sprawling, wealthy global metropolis of Muziris, and you are struck by its ephemeral, almost ghost-like nature. This is the undisputed center of the ancient world's spice trade, a harbor that commands the attention of distant emperors, yet it is built almost entirely of organic yielding materials. There are no colossal marble temples here, and there are no rigid paved avenues of stone. The entire urban landscape is constructed of carved wood, packed mud, and woven palm thatch. You feel the immense, terrifying vulnerability of such a place. It is a city that exists at the absolute mercy of the elements, completely exposed and vulnerable to the very water that gives it life and brings the merchant fleets to its shores. The sheer volume of the swollen Periyar River threatens to consume the fragile architecture, pulling the mud and timber back into the dark depths of the flood. You luxuriate in the exquisite fragility of this ancient harbor. The physical realities of the Malabar coast demand an impossible compromise from those who seek to build upon its shores. You watch the heavy rain punishing the thatched roofs of the distant storehouses, feeling the sheer overwhelming weight of the water as it endlessly attacks the organic foundations of the city. The stakes of this structural gamble are difficult to fully comprehend. If the river were to rise just a few spans higher, or if the muddy banks were to finally dissolve under the kinetic force of the currents, the entire center of global commerce would simply wash away into the Arabian Sea. You wait within the dry sanctuary of the warehouse, observing the delicate swaying outlines of the timber structures in the dark. The city presents a terrifying architectural paradox. It is a place of staggering wealth and absolute physical fragility, a temporary arrangement of wood and mud that seems completely incapable of surviving the brutal, endless cycle of the monsoon. The answer to this grand architectural mystery is not found in the strength of stone, but in the brilliant, fluid urban planning of an amphibious civilization. The architects of Muziris never attempted to build a rigid, unyielding grid like the great cities of Rome or Alexandria. They understood that to fight the water was to invite destruction. Instead, they designed a decentralized, yielding network of interconnected canals, elevated stilt houses, and deep tidal lagoons. You observe the profound genius of this layout in the dark. As the heavy floodwaters of the Periyar surge into the city, they are not met with solid walls. They are seamlessly absorbed and channeled through thousands of wide, shallow waterways, safely dispersing the immense kinetic energy of the swollen river. The city does not resist the annual flooding of the monsoon. It perfectly accommodates the deluge, expanding and breathing with the rhythm of the rising tides, allowing the water to flow harmlessly beneath the elevated floors of the merchant homes. The brilliant, fluid design of the ancient port allows the heavy, dark waters of the Periyar to glide smoothly past the wooden docks without tearing them away. You stand at the threshold, watching the deep, swirling currents move with a slow and terrifying grace beneath the heavy rain. The river is incredibly dense tonight, thick with a massive volume of suspended mountain silt carried down from the high peaks of the Western Ghats. This fine, heavy earth flows endlessly past the wooden pilings, an invisible suspended burden hidden entirely within the dark water. The steady, hissing sound of the rain against the river creates a deep and hypnotic lull, drawing your attention downward into the muddy depths. You watch the dark water rolling continuously toward the sea, entirely unaware that this very same suspended silt holds a deep and absolute finality, carrying the silent earthen weight that will one day bury everything you have just seen. You stand at the threshold, watching a single bright green leaf fall from the heavy canopy above. It lands softly upon the dark, swirling current of the Periyar River. You follow its slow, methodical journey as it floats away upon the muddy water, drifting further and further until it disappears entirely into the pitch black of the storm. As it vanishes, a deep, resonant, and muffled quiet begins to rise from the very bottom of the riverbed. It is the sound of settling mud, a continuous heavy accumulation of fine mountain silt gathering in the dark depths. You feel a profound sense of heavy protective burial settling over the amphibious city, a sensation akin to sinking slowly beneath a thick, suffocating quilt. The kinetic energy of the rain is still present, but the underlying foundation of the world feels as though it is preparing to yield to the overwhelming earthen weight of the suspended mountain dust. As the heavy silt continues its invisible descent beneath the rushing waves, a haunting reality begins to take shape in the cool, damp air. You look back toward the sprawling, bustling harbor of Muziris, with its towering wooden storehouses and massive Roman freighters. This is the undisputed center of the global spice trade, a vibrant, wealthy metropolis that dictates the flow of gold across the entire known world. Yet, despite its immense power and undeniable physical presence, this colossal port is destined to simply vanish. You feel the profound, terrifying weight of this historical erasure. For 2 millennia, the very location of this magnificent harbor will be completely lost to human maps and memory. The vibrant docks, the thick ledges, and the immense fortunes of black pepper will fade into myth, leaving behind only scattered, cryptic references in the distant archives of Rome and the ancient poems of Tamilakam. You luxuriate in the exquisite impossibility of this total disappearance. The physical realities of the ancient world demand that a city of such staggering economic importance leave an indelible scar upon the earth. You trace the solid, unyielding outlines of the laterite foundations and the massive teakwood beams, feeling the absolute permanence they project against the storm. The stakes of this geological vanishing act are difficult to comprehend. If an entire empire's wealth flowed through these wooden gates, how could the earth simply swallow it without a single trace? You wait within the heavy, hissing rain, observing the continuous rhythmic swelling of the dark river. The city presents a terrifying puzzle of endurance. It is a place of immense physical substance that seems entirely incapable of being erased, yet the heavy, muffled quiet of the settling mud below speaks of a different destiny, a slow and silent accumulation that will ultimately defy the ambition of kings and merchants alike. The answer to this haunting disappearance is found not in the flames of war, but in the cataclysmic Periyar flood of the year 1341. It is a massive tectonic and meteorological event that fundamentally rewrites the geography of the Malabar coast. A deluge of unimaginable proportions, far greater than the one you witness now, will tear through the Western Ghats. This unprecedented volume of water will carry millions of tons of heavy, dense silt down from the mountains, completely choking the deep harbor of Muziris and permanently shifting the river's mouth to the sea. The sprawling, amphibious city will not burn, nor will it be dismantled by invading armies. Instead, the Roman coins, the massive terracotta amphorae, and the great wooden docks will be gently, permanently buried deep beneath the quiet, oxygen-starved mud of what is known today as Patanam. The earth simply closes over the port, locking it away in absolute darkness. The profound realization of this geological event settles heavily upon the quiet timber walls. This colossal burial is not a violent destruction, but a perfect, silent preservation of the ancient world. The city of Muziris is never truly lost. It is simply sealed in perfect stillness, enveloped entirely in a deep anoxic tomb of heavy earth that will protect its secrets from the ravages of time and the decay of the tropical sun. You look out over the dark, rushing water one last time, feeling the immense protective weight of the mud gathering below the wooden pilings. The frantic, desperate pursuit of wealth and the chaotic energy of the global trade route are slowly, inevitably silenced by the sheer mass of the mountain silt. The heavy, dark waters of the Periyar glide smoothly past the docks, their deep, rumbling currents drawing your attention away from the buried city and pulling you outward toward the eternal, unbroken cycle of the rain itself. You turn away from the massive threshold and step slowly back into the center of the warehouse. The air inside the dry timber room is heavy and cool, completely insulated from the swirling flood. You stand before the brass nilavilaku, the oil lamp that has anchored this space against the storm. With a slow and deliberate motion, you reach out and pinch the thick cotton wick between your fingers, extinguishing the small golden flame. The light vanishes instantly, and the room is plunged into a soft, monochromatic darkness. The visual world is entirely erased, leaving only a total auditory immersion in the heavy, relentless drumming of the Edavapathy rain upon the steeply pitched terracotta roof above. You sit back upon a solid teakwood bench in the absolute blackness, surrounded by the deep, resonant vibration of the water falling upon the earth. Within this total darkness, a profound and heavy isolation settles over the room. You listen to the rhythmic, sweeping sound of the rain, and you feel the immense weight of the long night slowly lifting from your shoulders. The heavy iron chests of Roman gold are locked and secured. The massive crates of black pepper and the fragile thousand-flower glass are perfectly packed and shielded from the dampness of the river. The ancient, etched palm leaf ledger rests complete and bound in the shadows. There are no more ships to guide, no more coins to count, and no more timber to shape. You feel the physical and mental burden of the global trade route releasing its hold upon you. The storm rages with absolute fury just beyond the thick wooden walls, yet within this dark and empty space, there is absolutely nothing left for you to do but listen. You luxuriate in the exquisite emptiness of this moment. The physical conditions of the world outside dictate a continuous, chaotic struggle for survival, a relentless battle against the rising mud and the pouring sky. Yet, you are perfectly suspended within a pocket of total inactivity. You trace the smooth edge of the wooden bench in the dark, feeling the stark contrast between the violent kinetic energy of the flooded river and the profound, motionless quiet of your own body. The stakes of the ancient harbor no longer matter. If the merchants trade their fortunes or the empires squander their gold, it holds no sway over this absolute and isolated stillness. You wait within the pitch black, enveloped entirely by the heavy, suffocating sound of the water, and you wonder how the mind can simply surrender its desperate need for control when faced with the overwhelming, indifferent power of the monsoon. The answer to this quiet surrender is found in the deep, timeless, and comforting consistency of the rhythms of the earth. As you sit in the dark, the drumming of the rain ceases to be a storm and becomes a permanent, planetary heartbeat. Human empires will rise and inevitably collapse into dust. The heavy gold of the Yavanas will change hands 1,000 times, and the mighty Periyar River will eventually choke on its own silt and change its course forever. The sprawling wooden city of Muziris will vanish entirely beneath the mud. Yet, the heavy, rhythmic drumming of the southwest monsoon upon the Malabar coast is eternal. The massive atmospheric engine of the Indian Ocean does not alter its path for kings or merchants. The sound of the falling water that surrounds you in the absolute dark sounds exactly the same tonight as it will 2,000 years in the future. The eternal, unbroken cycle of the rain washes away the final remnants of the ancient night. You surrender completely to the heavy, continuous vibration resonating through the teakwood floor. The solid walls of the warehouse seem to dissolve into the dark, leaving you suspended within the boundless, hissing expanse of the storm. Your awareness slowly unmoors from the solid earth, drifting out past the wooden docks and onto the dark, rain-swept surface of the swollen river. The violent currents of the surface give way to a heavy, sluggish momentum. You are carried away on a gentle, slow-moving tide of deep, undisturbed rest, pulling away from the shores of the ancient world. The sound of the falling water stretches out into an infinite flat horizon, and you continue to drift upon the heavy flood, sinking effortlessly and permanently into the quiet, forgotten history of the earth.